for like, nope, who even uses bank branches anymore? I remember when online banking first became a thing, and I remember there were articles that like online, it makes no sense because there's only two things a person wants to do at a bank: deposit their paycheck and get cash. And those are two things you can't do online. Well, you can do the equivalent of those two things online right now. First of all, you don't even need to deposit your paycheck. That's all handled online now. But you can deposit your paycheck from a phone. And while you can't get physical cash, you can do the equivalent because you can load onto a prepaid card, or you can have a prepaid card attached to your account. Those things have all been replaced by higher tech substitutes that don't require you. Wouldn't be inconvenient at all if you didn't live near a branch of your bank. It used to be you would go to your local bank branch because that's where all your financial services would be. You don't go there for a loan. How many people would go to a local bank branch if they need a loan, right? Nobody would do that anymore. So I think we're going to see that type of revolution with real-world asset tokenization and democratizing access to things like real estate and loans and all kinds of investments built into the XRP ledger. So I'm hoping that we're going to see, as real-world asset tokenization projects grow, I think the XRP ledger is going to be a really good platform for them to launch on, particularly because of the low fees and because of the integration with the DEX, with the proximity to sort of the movement of funds. The ability, if someone's going to buy, what do you want to do with a real-world tokenized asset? You want to buy it, you want to sell it, you want to hold it, you want to transfer it. And if you want to buy it and sell it, you want to be able to do that with whatever asset is convenient for you. You don't want to tie, if you tokenize some sort of debt, you don't want to tie it to US dollars because then that limits access to it to people who have sort of proximity to US dollars. One of the things the XRP ledger is good for is giving you sort of proximity to many different assets, and that exchange is seamlessly built in. So I think that's one of the many reasons why the XRP ledger is going to be a good place to launch tokenized real-world assets. I think we'll see that in the next year and a half.
Cool, yeah, and there's already, yeah. And there's already a number of projects using the XRP ledger for tokenization use cases. So yeah, hopefully we'll see more. We will see more.
It's funny how many projects I found out about because they filed briefs in our litigation with the SEC. That was the weirdest thing ever. I don't know if you guys remember numerous participants in the XRP ledger ecosystem filed briefs with the court saying, "Hey, we're using the SEC has said the XRP has no utility," and there were projects I'd never heard of. that I'd never seen. It's like the least efficient way for me to find out about.
Yeah, no, that's interesting actually. Okay, let's talk about interoperability. How crucial, in your opinion, is cross-chain collaboration? And how is Ripple and XRPL approaching this? And what do you think developers should keep in mind when it comes to that?
Well, I think that's critical. I think the idea that I don't think there is anybody yet, again, maybe a couple of Bitcoin maximalists who think even the Bitcoin ecosystem has accepted that the layer one is not, everything is not going to happen on layer one. They've all come to accept that interoperability is going to be important, that different blockchains are going to have to focus on different use cases and target different groups of people. So interoperability is going to have to exist to make that painless. If there's a layer one and it serves some subset of what people want, but not everything, if you think about technologies that have been successful, the internet being my favorite example, everything that you want is on the internet. And if it's not, why the hell isn't it? Where the hell else would it be, right? That ecosystem has everything you could possibly want it. And that's why probably every single person in this room has a phone on them that gives them access to the internet. And the vast majority of you probably have home internet access. And it's not for any one specific thing. It's because the whole ecosystem has tremendous value to you. And it's that portability. If you had to have one smartphone to access Twitter and one smartphone for email and one type of home access to do work stuff, it would not be compelling at all. It would be a terrible experience. And so interoperability and commitment to standards is going to be extremely important if we're going to have a compelling ecosystem. If we don't have a compelling ecosystem, then we're not going to be able to build a wall around the XRP ledger and get people inside that wall. No cryptocurrency has that kind of market power yet. And so and the value proposition is the openness.
Yeah.
So that's going to mean interoperability is going to be critical.
Definitely, yeah. With the emergence of various layer 2 solutions and side chains in different blockchain projects, how do you see the evolution of XRPL in terms of scalability and layer 2 integrations, and what opportunities does this present for developers?
Yeah, so that's kind of the other half of what I was just saying. So the way the interoperability is going to look probably for the XRP ledger is probably going to be side chains or sort of adjacent layer ones. So if you think about a feature like any sort of feature that's kind of heavy and that requires like tremendous resources to implement, hooks is a good example of a feature that's like moderately heavy. There's costs associated with adopting it on the main chain. There's benefits too, but there's also costs. And there are going to be features that are good and that people will want where the costs associated with implementing it on main chain are going to mean that that's not going to be doable. And the other thing that you have is whatever capability the main chain has, however many transactions per second it can handle, there will be people who want more transactions than that for some use case. There'll be some use case that requires some very, very high number of transactions. There may be somebody who wants to issue millions of NFTs. And their use case may be very important to them, and the rest of us may not care about it. It doesn't make sense to put it on main chain. But we don't want to exclude that person from the ecosystem because there would be no reason to say no to someone who wants to build something that adds value to the ecosystem. It just can't go on the main chain. So what that means is that we need to have a robust ecosystem of things like side chains and other layer ones, and we need asset portability. Because one of the most difficult things about launching a sidechain is getting assets that have actual value on it. And so there's a proposal for bridge support on the XRP ledger, which will help to bridge assets to the XRP ledger. And that way, when you develop some new technology, and you want to prove that it works. So let's say you came up with some new idea for the XRP ledger to do, I don't know, crypto collateralized stable coins or something, it doesn't matter, or maybe some new form of smart contracts or some other DeFi thing that nobody else thought of, and you propose it to the XRP ledger, the burden that you have is convincing people that the resource consumption won't be burdensome, that it won't destabilize the network, that it doesn't have a bug in it that allows funds to be stolen. One of the best ways to prove that is to actually deploy the technology live with real money and show it working. You say, look, here you go. We've got this chain on which it's running, and what's a how is going to do for hooks. You say, look, it's working. Obviously, it could break, but if it works, it's going to, look, it's working. Here it is handling real money. Our validators are stable. Their resource consumption is reasonable. The network is working. This is proof that this is safe to adopt, and that will help to sort of overcome that heavy burden that we don't want to make changes to main chain that could risk destabilizing the network or causing other problems. And so that ecosystem is going to be good for the main chain. It's going to be good for developers who want to build on a side chain. And it gives you immediate horizontal scalability. Anytime you have another layer one or another chain, however many transactions it has, that is at zero cost to mainnet. And so you can immediately have, another chain with 1,000 transactions per second, or it could be a chain that's heavier or lighter, has different features that you want. That's going to enable people to broaden that ecosystem. And it's also going to lower the sort of cost of admission. Right now, you want to get a feature running with real money, you got to get it adopted on mainnet, which is very, very difficult to do. Being able to launch it on a sidechain is just going to streamline that process.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about user experience, because as the crypto landscape evolves, user experience is becoming paramount for wider adoption. So what user experiences challenges do you believe still need to be solved within the XRPL ecosystem, and how can developers play a role in solving those challenges?
Yeah, user experience is like the most important thing when you're trying to get anybody other than enthusiasts. When you're trying to attract enthusiasts, they care about the technology. If you want to sell me a computer, tell me what CPU is in it, tell me what SSD it has, tell me how much RAM it has, tell me the clock timings on the RAM, and I'm excited about that. But that's not how you sell a computer to like my mom, right? Like what matters to her is, am I going to be able to use it? Is it going to break? Am I going to be able to understand what I'm doing, or is it going to constantly ask me confusing questions that I don't know how to answer, and I feel like I'm not having a good experience while I'm using it? For retail adoption, for mass adoption, for anyone but an enthusiast, your product is the user experience. right? A car manufacturer doesn't just sell a car, they sell the experience of not just driving their car, but owning their car. They sell the experience of having a flat tire and having to deal with roadside service. They sell the experience of having to do maintenance on it, the experience of ownership. And that's very important to people. And if they get a good experience, then they like that product. And that's how you get that sort of mass retail adoption. And that's totally different from the enthusiast market. We hit an inflection point around the introduction of NFTs, where we started to see, coming from the crypto, like prior to that, almost everything in the cryptocurrency space was aimed at enthusiasts. The idea was you had to really care about decentralization, and you had to care about the tech and understand, like, what encryption and digital signatures were to use the tech, and that was fine because that was what everybody was excited about. But we first started to see projects, NFT-based, I think were around the very first, that were basically all around the user experience, that were like, NBA Hot Shots is a good example, where Top Shots, excuse me, was a good example of they were not that successful, but they sold something like $1 billion worth of NFTs before they failed. So it's hard to use them as a bad example. I mean, that was astonishing, right? But what was interesting was that how many of their customers even knew what technology they were using? I don't even know that most of them cared. What they cared about was that there were players in the NBA that they liked, and they owned a piece of them that nobody else owned, and that's what was important. It was that user experience. And so it's going to be extremely critical, if you're aiming for mass adoption, that the user experience be fantastic. One of the biggest problems, of course, is custody. There's no technical service for the XRP ledger. Like, if you make a bad transaction, there's no friendly person answering the customer service phone number to help, the stereotypical, mom to be able to resolve a problem. And some of that is inherent in the technology, and that's something we're going to have to figure out. Every technology that's got mass adoption has had to figure that out. If some of you are old enough to remember copying machines like 20 years ago and printers, they broke down all the time. And if you wanted to have one, you had to have an office with someone professional coming around to service it routinely, and that means nobody's going to be able to print things at home. Like, they had to solve the problem of making the technology reliable and bulletproof, and just nail down those user experiences. And that's what we have to do if we want mass adoption.
Yeah, those are great points. I agree 100%. So we only have time for a few more questions, and I want to leave time for some jokes because David has a ton of great jokes. But the last question I'll ask before we get into the jokes, what are you looking forward to in terms of Apex 2024 next year, which I believe is in June? Mm-hmm. Possibly in Amsterdam?
Right, yes, it's going to be in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
June 2024. I want to see all of you there. You too.
Everyone here needs
you,
to be
not
here.
so much.
But what are you looking
It's
forward
not indicating
to?
any specific person. This guy here lost smile at me, thinks I was indicating him. I was pointing in his general direction, but I was pointing over him, actually the guy right behind him. Yeah, you. Yeah. Yep, one nodding. Yep. You're excused.
Everyone is welcome next year, and we hope to see all of you. But David, what are you looking forward to? Like, what do you hope to talk about next year? What are you excited about? Well,
I really hope that I'm going to be able to talk about how amazing the AMM implementation went and have some actual numbers on how it's actually working. But I'm also just very excited to see what members of the community are able to come up with that I can't, ever think of. And of course, you'll get an update on real-world asset tokenization, which I think is going to come pretty far. And of course, decentralized identity and all of those other things that I talked about should be, pretty far along.
Cool.
Anything else before the jokes?
No, we've got 3 minutes for jokes. I know sometimes your jokes can be about 3 minutes, so.
Well, you know what I'll do? I haven't told a pirate joke in a while, and in honor of Hooks, I'm going to tell my favorite pirate joke. This is my absolute favorite pirate joke of all. It's a tight field because there's a lot of pirate jokes. I just have to apologize. I cannot do a pirate accent. I apologize for that. You will not hear a pirate accent. You'll have to imagine that the lines that pirate says are in a pirate accent, but I'm not even going to try to do it. So a man just finished work, and he's walking home, and he's kind of thirsty. He passes by a bar, and he decides that he'll stop in and get something to drink. So he stops in the bar, and he sees a man at the end of the bar in a pirate costume. And I mean the most amazing Hollywood-grade pirate costume you've ever seen. Peg leg, hook hand, eye patch, everything but the parrot. And he walks up to the guy and he says, I can't help but noticing that is one of the most pirates anywhere. He goes, no, there still are pirates. He's like, no, there aren't pirates. And it's like, no, there still are pirates. I'm a pirate. He says, all right, if you're a pirate, how'd you get the peg leg? He says, well, you're never going to believe this. It was my